The difference between democratic socialism and, scary Venezuela socialism, which is what we're going to hear all about in the next 84 days or so until the election. Venezuela-style socialism is much more government takes over more and more industries, and they take the money.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Before You Speak podcast, where we thoughtfully deep dive into topics that we think are relevant for the times we are living in. But before we do that, I'm your host, Eric Peterson, just processing the fire hose in my news feed with this guy somewhere. We do it every week.
Here. East.
East.
Hey,
You're actually technically west, I think.
Oh, I've never, since I moved here, I don't know east from west or north from south, to be honest. It's all backwards. Hey, everybody, I am Elwin, and the fire hose of my news feed is, well, it sounds great with the new microphone. So I'm happy about that. But really, I think it's hiding in a Turkish Airlines food cart.
Which I think that's where we can start today. Tell us a little bit more about that, because apparently Trump was in Turkey. Was he golfing in Turkey?
No, this was when he was overseas for some meeting, like some official thing. It wasn't golf, it was an official thing, I think, related to the Iran war, because all the press was there, all this shit, and it was in this story, a similar story or a related story was in the news about a month ago, because it came out that he wanted to fly, I think, the jet that Qatar had given him. He wanted to fly that one home, but the Secret Service was like, no, you can't do that. There's too many security risks to do that. And it just came out that he didn't fly Air Force One back on that trip either. He flew in a completely separate airplane because they were worried about an Iranian assassination plot against him. So he flew on some separate airplane altogether. They moved him onto that plane in secret in like a Turkish Airlines food service cart. I don't know if you ever saw the videos of how Taylor Swift would get brought out to the stage in her most recent tour. It was in a giant food cart so that people wouldn't go batshit crazy when they saw her running backstage to get on stage. Same thing, only Donald Trump, which kind of made me think, what if it had tipped over? Like, he's a pretty heavy guy. But
I would hate it.
But also,
the smell of it inside after he was in there had just got to be horrendous.
Yeah. Yes.
He's like, I'm alone, so he just lets all the flatulence go.
Yeah. It's like, no one will know. It's like, dude, when they open the door, they're going to know. They're all that shit open. but also, on a slightly more serious note, nobody knew about this, right? So Air Force One was loaded and ready to go. Everybody, I thought that the president was on Air Force One. Now, Air Force One, we all think of it as the big plane with the blue and the white paint and rolls up onto the tarmac. That's not technically accurate. Air Force One is a call sign for whatever plane the president happens to be on. So Air Force One can be a Cessna. It doesn't matter. If the president's on the plane, that plane is Air Force One. Same with a helicopter. It's Marine Force One if it's a helicopter. So as part of this plan to secret Donald Trump away on a separate airplane, they did not change the call sign of the other plane, which puts everybody on that plane at risk. Because if somebody is actually trying to take that plane down, they're going to look for call sign Air Force One, assume that the president is on it because that's what the call sign means, and blow it up, or do whatever it is they were going to do. So it's pretty unusual. I don't know if it's ever happened before that a president was like, no, keep the call sign on the other plane and put everybody in there in that plane at risk. So yeah, the whole thing is half hilarious because, apparently Trump is really mad that this came out, that he was on a food service cart. Half hilarious, half another example of just what a shitbag this guy is, that he will just put these people at risk for no really good reason. It could have been done another way.
Yeah. It's not or it's par for the course. The question: would you vote for Taylor Swift for president? I
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
I
her
think
politics are great.
I was gonna say, I think that would win it. I think that I don't even think she would have to campaign. I think she could just put her name on the ballot and not do anything. No videos, nothing. Literally, just she's an option, and I think she wins.
I think it would be really funny to see, like, especially in Kansas City, MAGA Chiefs fans try to reconcile what they have to do, what they're supposed to do here. Like,
Yes.
fuck Travis Kelce. I love that guy. And the Chiefs, that Taylor Swift. I can't do it. They really, I think they'd be like wandering around in the street confused for a week or two.
Yeah, that's 1,000% correct. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm ready for just about anybody else to be president other than the current one, just because it takes up so much energy and thought to rectify what's going on in our country right now. I mean, which ultimately maybe all this is a good thing because I'm learning. I mean, we started this podcast. I know more about the government than I've ever known in my life, currently, and continuing to learn. So, I mean, there's that, which um, one thing I learned this week, and I'd love your thoughts on this because we talked about it briefly before we started. Is I'm learning that local governments are now starting to sign, and maybe this is a historic thing. I don't fully know because I haven't done a ton of research on it yet or like dug into it. Is that it's coming out that a lot of local governments, particularly in Louisiana, there's two guys that are now posting regularly about this because their city councils, their mayors, and the governor in some circumstances are signing NDAs about data center developments and additionally other developments, including there was NDAs that by companies like Hyundai, Meta, Tesla, like all these big companies had these local governments sign NDAs. And my initial thought immediately is, how in the fuck is it even legal for NDAs to get signed by local government? I thought this was the entire purpose of local government. So I looked at Austin, and of course, as soon as I started looking at Austin, there's a development going in North Austin that is expected to be planned. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's massive, and part of the build out and who's funding the build out, it turns out, is Amazon and one other tech company. But the city council had to sign NDAs not to release this information to the public about who's funding the build out and what a lot of the commercial square footage is going to be used for, which ultimately we're going to find out that it's going to be data centers and potentially AI build outs. So, like, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this because this is pretty fucked up, in my opinion.
Yeah, you and I have been talking about, like, sort of creating a list of norms that should be codified. I don't know to what extent this is a norm yet, but it should be just against the law. So at least if there's some sort of national security risk, if it's an army base or whatever, there's exceptions to the rule. But if it's just a private company that wants to come in and build out and build a factory, build a data center, whatever, why on earth would an NDA be needed? And I'm sure that the companies can think of a million good reasons, but it doesn't matter. These public officials are public officials. They're elected to represent us. And how can we trust that they're representing our interests if they're signing agreements that prevent them from talking about probably some of the biggest deals that are going on, right? Hyundai, a lot of these manufacturers, when you talk about Louisiana and Alabama and Arkansas and places like that, I don't know about Arkansas, but Mercedes, Hyundai, they have huge manufacturing plants in those states that do a lot of good, bring a lot of jobs, provide a lot of economic benefit. So I understand where a public official might feel up against it if they're going, well, I'll go to the next state and they'll sign the NDA. But it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. The idea that a public official is signing an NDA in a private deal, with a private company, instant no, immediate no. There's no trust there's no trust to be found there.
Yeah, and look, I've been part of NDAs before. I remember when I was working in the music industry, I got a job doing day-to-day management for Janet Jackson. And shortly after I started working for Janet, when I started working for Janet, I had to sign a bunch of NDAs, but I also had to sign additional NDAs when we found out Michael had passed, because I had to patch Janet into phone calls with Michael and her family, and I had to, like, those calls were extremely like sought after by like TMZ and all these different people, and so they made us all sign NDAs to make sure that the as they were arguing about who gets what, that this doesn't become like a giant public affair, which is totally understandable, right? They're paying me a salary. Like, I got a salary working for them, and this was this was known to me prior to that. I had to keep everything that happened in this world secret because they didn't want it being public information. That's what I was being paid for. It is the exact fucking opposite when you go into being a public official. Like, you are going in to expose corruption, to advocate for the people. So if you are signing an NDA with a private company, you are literally doing the exact opposite of what your job is. And it just, like, every time a layer of this shit gets exposed, I'm just like, how have we gotten here? And how has this ever been okay? Like, and you're 1,000% correct. This is one of those things that this needs to be a federal law. Like, this should not be happening on any level of government, that NDAs get signed to pass that in regards to any public interest in anything.
An NDA, by definition, is only asked for when there's information that one party doesn't want getting out. That's what it is, right? There's no other reason to sign an NDA. There's no like hidden secondary purpose behind an NDA. Like, a prenup can be used to preserve wealth that was gained before marriage. It's not, it doesn't have to be nasty. It can be nasty. It can be, innocent and honest and all fine. An NDA is always designed to prevent someone else from telling people information that one party believes people will be interested in, to their detriment, to that party's detriment. So yeah, absolutely not from public officials. Now, it's interesting if this becomes more widespread in the news about data centers in particular, because I do think more and more, I'm not sure we appreciate how big of an issue electorally data centers are. I'm involved in this Get Out the Vote project here, and almost every meeting, and certainly when I go, I go to fundraising events to raise money for this, the idea of data centers comes up in every single one of them across all age groups. Nobody is happy with how data centers are being handled by their governments. And it is absolutely, if Gina Hinojosa here in Texas wins the governorship, that is either issue 1 or 1A that propels her to the governorship.
Well, and you're 1,000% correct, because this is the thing about data centers. And new infrastructure always is a challenge to get by, right? Like, new infrastructure, when you're talking about like roads, for example, like Austin, Texas, I'm sure in the early 2000s, I can guarantee you old school Austinites that were on city council fought expanding the existing infrastructure tooth and nail, right? Only fast forward 15 to 20 years, Austin explodes. And now there's all this kind of like frustration because, like, man, we had the ability to build out this infrastructure early and we decided not to do it. And it came back to bite us in the ass. So we are looking at, to some degree, a little bit of a moment in time where this could be a situation, but all of this stuff needs to be handled transparency, and it also needs to be clearly explained what the public benefit is, and that these companies should not, like, the taxpayers should not be funding this infrastructure. Like, if this is not if we don't have a public stake, which we don't because we're not, a communist or fully socialist country, if we don't have a stake in these companies that are building out this infrastructure, then it should be done on their dime, and they should be required to build out the power and also increase the ability to gain natural resources, whether that's rainwater collection, whether whatever, bolstering the grid for more power, building out nuclear power. They should be responsible for that infrastructure because they're the ones that directly benefit from the outcome of the data centers. So unless we're all publicly, roads are different, right? We all get a drive on them. So we can argue that the infrastructure is something that the taxpayers should be involved in. Right now, there's none of that for these data centers. And don't get me wrong, I understand we all use technology, but we fucking pay for it. We pay for it with our
Yeah.
subscription, buying devices, all of it.
And the deal that's being proposed from the data companies to the taxpayers, to the people, is a shit deal. It's just a shit deal. Hey, give us a bunch of tax breaks. Give us some breaks on electricity. We're going to build a giant fucking box warehouse that's going to make a shit ton of noise. It's not going to employ a lot of people after it's built. It's going to take up a bunch of your water. It's going to raise your electricity costs. And, you're going to get AI. And everybody's like, what does that even mean? What is AI? Like more ChatGPT? I use ChatGPT enough. It's like, no, you're going to get better AI. Oh, well, what's that going to do? It's going to take your job. You're not going to have to work. Well, how the fuck am I going to pay my mortgage? What do you mean it's going to take my job? Right. And, every time these guys open their mouths, Sam Altman he said, it was Jeff Bezos, sorry, who basically said in an interview, you should want to give up your water in the short term for the good of humanity. And it's like, no, man, these people are not, they're human because they have human DNA, these tech executives. And more people just feel like the whole deal is a complete ripoff with zero benefit, all downside. And that's why these things are falling. And that's why it is, I think, a massive issue. Roads are obvious. Roads are just like, does this road cost a lot of money? How much does it cost? Is it going to work? Like, is the expanded highway going to make traffic better? And how long am I going to be sitting in traffic for?
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole of it with roads. You don't have to justify what the roads are for.
Yeah. Jeff Bezos giving interviews about and telling us to sacrifice our water while somebody's washing his feet with 4 bottles of Fiji at the same time. It's just nobody wants to hear this shit. Read the room, asshat.
Yeah.
None of it makes any sense. And then ironically enough, going back to last week's episode when we talked a little bit about surveillance state, was that last week?
Yeah.
But there also is noticeably more flock cameras surrounding data centers. So these data centers are also getting more government protection than the average area, which is also complete horseshit. So which if I had to guess, part of this is probably in those NDAs and part of these deals that we're not able to see. So all of this stuff is horseshit to me, and all of it needs to be exposed. And watching some of these people come out now and actually walk people down or walk people through these processes, because you can actually see which deals had NDAs signed on them in a lot of these circumstances. You just obviously can't see the NDA. So yeah, now I'm like, okay, what has Austin signed off on? How many things has been agreed to by our city council and our elected officials that we have no idea about because they signed these NDAs, and now I want to know all of it. So I'm more curious than ever before, and now I'm going to start digging into it, these freaking assholes. So
yeah, if your kid's teacher made your kid sign an NDA before the school year, there's no fucking way, right? No, I have a right to know what's going on, right? It's not that much different, right? If our public officials are signing NDAs with private companies to spend our tax money on our dime, on our land, using our water, no, just hard no, stop, illegal, end.
Yeah. And this is stuff we need to be paying attention to. This is stuff that, as it comes up to the surface, that people need to start really understanding. Like, man, it's not just the big elections that matter. Like, we need to be voting in local elections. We need to be voting for people in city council, for mayors, for like all of the local seats, for the Texas congressional seats. All of these things need to be voted on, and they need to be researched, because we need people that are going to fight this stuff, and make sure that the people understand what's actually going on in the state. Because, you know, this shit's going on. Data centers are being built everywhere. Meanwhile, like, public schools are getting shut down left and right. They're banning THC after we heavily voted to not do that. Like, all of these, like, slowly restricting our rights and taking things away from us while robbing us at the same time. And people have to understand it and see it for what it is. And you see it through the local government's the first place. It's not just the big elections that make changes. To be honest, the big elections probably have the least amount of impact on us locally. So we really need to be invested in this world. Which,
Yep.
speaking of local elections, Max Miller, this is a hilarious story, because this dude had serious allegations, hospital records about his daughter's broken clavicle, I believe. Numerous recordings and court filings regarding some of the abuse and different things, and multiple women, which I think we discussed last week. A lot of the people in the RNC, from my understanding, were encouraging him to step back, and the day for them, or the deadline for them to replace him, my understanding, was yesterday. And this motherfucker was like, nah, I'm hanging on. Like,
Yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts on that first?
We talked about last week. This guy's just a complete piece of garbage. This is human garbage. Some of the stuff that we didn't touch on last week, his attorney accidentally released to the public, it made public some discovery. In it was a picture of his daughter, who was like quite young, right? Naked, showing her genitalia. And that picture was then viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. And it was a mistake, right? The attorney said it was a mistake, but still, geez, fuck, man. And he's gone on and he's been like, I'm going to show you all these texts. I'm going to send all these texts. And one of the issues that apparently exists in this relationship that he has with his ex-wife and daughter, is the daughter has a stuffed bunny that she's had since she was born, and she loves it, and she takes it from parent to parent when she's with the different parents, and sometimes she leaves it at the parent's house. So sometimes she leaves it, I'm sure she leaves it at her mom's house. Sometimes, quite clearly, sometimes she leaves it at his house, and he's just a complete asshole with getting it back to her. Right, where the attorneys have had to call the attorneys and be like, God, just get the stuffy back. Like, well, I'll leave it in the mailbox, but only if this person picks it up. And the senator, Bernie Moreno, would be like, remember, that's his father-in-law.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, I'll send my aide over to pick it up. It's like, nope, it has to be only the person that's been appointed by the court that can do this. I won't give it to you. And the guardian for the child, the lawyer for the child, is like, guys, get her the stuffy. And I was reading this and I was like, the amount of piece of shit you have to be, like, I don't know if we weigh this, if this is measured in pounds, right? Like, you have to be like a 36-pound piece of shit to make returning your kid's stuffy impossible for the other side. It's the kind of thing that that's in movies about divorces, where just, it's a control issue. Right. That's all it is. It's I want to control who comes to get this. I don't care at all about my kid and the fact that she wants her stuffy. I want control over who's coming up to my mailbox. And this, he's running good. I'm glad he's still running, because the polls have him down like anywhere between 8 and 12 points to Poindexter, who's his opponent.
Great name.
But it's really like one of the worst cases, I think, of just Uh, it's just a person being a terrible human and still hanging on.
I have so many issues with this. One, look, my divorce with my daughter's mom was not friendly and ugly, and it was ugly the entire time. But there was one thing that we were both consistent about, and it's putting our kids first. Like my youngest daughter, my ex-wife had this robe that she wore when she was nursing our daughters, and when they got a little bit older, we took the robe and made a blanket out of it. And that was the blanket that my daughters used. So my daughter would wrap the blanket around her hand and then she would suck her thumb. And that's how she would go to sleep just about every night. And there was times that she would leave that blanket at her house, and dude, it was a no-brainer. Like there was no way she was going to sleep without it. So we went and got the blanket, and then eventually we cut up the bigger robe and made multiple blankets, so we had them everywhere, so we didn't have to deal with that for that reason, because it was the best thing for our daughter and we wanted her to sleep at night, and that's how she comforted herself. And it blows my mind to hear stories like this, because yeah, like the level of like narcissism and lack of care for another human being, it just shows through with that. Like if you can't care for your daughter in the most simplistic form of just recognizing like, man, this seems silly to you, but it's like their entire world. Like how are you going to be a public servant? Like, how are you going to give a shit about anybody else in your constituency? And I hope his constituents know that. Then let's go a step beyond that and just talk about the Republican Party in general, because dude, it was just a month ago that they were lambasting Democrats for Graham Plattner's rape allegation. And look, the Democratic Party has, and same with the dude from California, whatever his name is, Sewell
Swalwell.
or Swalwell. Swalwell, yeah, the Democrats, ran him out of town pretty quickly, and we're like, look, like there's enough here, credible allegation that we're going to call this, and like we don't want you to be in this race. And it's just interesting the dynamic, the differences we see in these two parties, in that this dude has far more documentation about the piece of shit that he is, the abuse that's occurred, more women involved, and I think people had asked him to come out, but like, dude, a lot of these people, none of them have really publicly made a stance to be like, yeah, this dude should be backing out. And now we're seeing in real time, like just the big difference between the big divide between what's going on in our country is narcissistic sociopaths on one side of it, and then this push to like try to get back to a people-centric, constituent-based, hopefully moral-based government, which we just haven't seen in a long time, and from Democrats either. So like, but
yeah, I mean, I think you're being a little kind to the Democrats on that last description, but overall, like the bar that the Democrats clear with Plattner and Swalwell is incredibly low. It's incredibly low, but at least they clear it. At least these things on the Democratic side seem to generally have a pattern, which is allegation comes out, guy makes a statement, another allegation comes out a couple days or a couple weeks later, and then the pressure starts to build. Endorsements start to drop. The big senators who have endorsed whoever it might be in that state or in that wing of the party start to speak out against this person, and that person digs in harder and finally, petulantly withdraws and makes some stupid video, self-serving video about how they've been wronged. But so it's muddy and shitty, but the outcome is right. The outcome is that someone who is, unable to comport themselves like a normal, sane, non-criminal human who doesn't abuse women or children isn't a public officer anymore. That's the correct outcome. On the Republican side, no, the bar is the same bar. It doesn't get cleared, and nobody's really trying to clear it either.
Yeah. And this is the problem. And I'm really curious to see how this ends up panning out in Texas because, like we've gone from there, dude, there's so much terrible shit going on here. We're watching Big Ben getting torn down in front of our eyes. We're watching a ban on THC, which, the majority of Texas voted against, having that being pulled out from under us, while the intentions behind it are clear. Like, it's the lobbying groups it's that paid these fuckers out that are driving this whole thing. So like we're seeing all of this stuff kind of transpire all at one time. Guys like Ken Paxton running for office again, who are clearly like they're terrible human beings. And I'm like, man, like we really are kind of at a fork in the road with this election, like these midterms. It's like really uh it almost feels like a good versus evil. And that's again, like, I think you're right. I don't want to define the Democratic Party as that because they've done some awful shit. And to be honest, haven't had the balls to actually fight when the moment needs fighting and then, stand back and let things pan out when it needed to stand back. I feel like they're all over the place. But man, like, I just want decent human beings, even if we disagree on, like, uh, Romney, for example. Like, I never worried about that dude. Like, he just came across as like, I disagreed with him politically, but I never felt like he was like, trying to have sex with children. So like, I just miss a time where like, yeah, we can have a policy debate, but I'm also like not worried if you're in the Epstein files or not.
Yeah, I think the question ultimately is, what are we willing to set aside to get, in the most kind way to describe this, to get the policies that we prefer implemented? Take the person out of it first, on the other side, on the policy side. So what are we willing to accept, either politically or in the persona and the personal character, the moral character of the people we elect, in search of and in the fight of the policies that we want implemented? And that's a really hard question, right? It's easy. It should be easy when we're talking about the Max Millers and Graham Plattners of the world, but it very, very quickly gets sticky, right? And we're going to talk about the DSA and Megan Romer, so I'll just kind of go right there, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with Mamdani. Like, Mamdani, what am I willing to accept when it comes to his anti-Zionism in favor of policies that I think are generally good and that I want to see implemented and that I think make for a better city? Uh, you know, that's a really hard. I don't know what the answer to it is. In Mamdani's case, I've made the decision that, I continue to support him, but I've got,
Yeah.
I'm watching. I pretty regularly, do a Google search on like Mamdani's response to some news event or, some attack on people in New York City. But that I think is at the heart of it. And, you know, the DSA is going to come into this because this woman, Megan Romer, the co-chair of the DSA, went on a podcast with David Remnick, who's a New York Times reporter, and said that she would have gone to the rally on October 8th in New York City if she was in New York City. She would have attended that. And I think it's worth explaining exactly what was going on October 8th. October 7th, we know. Right, October
Mm-hmm.
7th, Hamas militants plus some Gazan civilians, we now know, broke through the border fence, parachuted in some cases into a music festival, and killed over 1,200, Israeli citizens. Were some of them military? Yeah, probably, but the vast majority of them were not. Okay, they killed kids, families. They sexually abused them. They mutilated them. They recorded it all. They filmed it all. It's on their GoPros, right? Just a incredibly horrific, inhumane terrorist event. They kidnapped over 250 people, including a Holocaust survivor and a baby, a 10-month-old baby. Okay, that was October 7th. October 8th, before the Israeli government or military knew what end was up, absolutely before they had met even as a government to figure out what to do, worldwide, including in New York City, were a bunch of rallies in support of what Hamas had done the day before. Right? It's no different than rallies in other parts of the world on September 12th. There's zero difference. Zero difference. Okay. Now, this woman, the co-chair of the DSA, said that, yeah, she would have gone to that rally because, insert claptrap about apartheid state and open air prison and all this shit, which, whatever, I'm not going to get into that. It really is a separate issue, whether you believe that was what the state of Gaza was on October 6th or not. If you go to that rally, you are supporting what Hamas did. Those were pro-Hamas rallies. There was no mystery about it. And I remember being more stunned on October 8th than on October 7th because I couldn't figure out what there's rallies in support of this. How on earth could there be rallies in support of this? Right? You don't have to like Israel to think that what Hamas did was terrorist and shitty and awful and inhumane and should never be supported. That's not even a low bar. That bar is fucking underground, right? And here's this woman, the co-chair of the DSA, which is absolutely ascendant right now with Abdul El-Sayed and Mamdani and a bunch of other, lower end politicos, saying that yes, she would have attended that. And, as long as, that it didn't mean supporting harm to non-civilians, to civilians and non-combatants, to which David Remnick was like, sure does. And she was like, really? You think it does? Like, yes, of course it fucking does. Right. So goes back to my initial point, which is like, what are we willing to accept in furtherance of policies that we believe are good? So I'll pivot to Al-Sayed for a second, because he is making an attempt to handle this, I think, better than anybody else. Like, he's drawing a pretty interesting point, which is, he is anti-Zionist, there's no doubt about that. So he says he would not support unconditional military aid to any country, including, he says in interviews all the time, his home country of Egypt. He would not support unconditional military aid to Egypt. So it's like, all right, I like the word unconditional in there because it means that if there were conditions, he might support military aid, but I don't know where he sets the bar on those conditions, what they are. They might be so unreasonable that he's just never going to support military aid to Israel ever. And he might set different conditions for different countries, but okay, it's an interesting line. And then he follows that with, the interviewer invariably asks him why, what's the reason? And he says, because I think that, the $3 billion we sent to Israel in military aid is better spent on healthcare in the United States. And yeah, kinda, right? Like, yeah. I don't kinda agree. I think that a lot of foreign aid would be better spent on healthcare in the United States. Even if it's not, I think that military spending would be better spent on healthcare in the United States. I think there's a million things that we spend money on that could go to more important issues that are affecting people, more important budget lines and policies that are affecting people today because they're so poorly addressed in our country. Yeah. So, now that this woman from the DSA is sitting out there and I'm like, you motherfucker, I can't. I don't have a vote for Sayed, and I don't know how he's going to respond to that. This woman absolutely should get fired from her job. Absolutely. But if that's actually how they feel, yeah, I have a pretty big problem with that. I have a pretty big problem with the entire Democratic Party if they cannot draw a line in the sand and say, October 8th, bad.
Yeah. This isn't that fucking hard. And, like her sentiment, because you sent me the interview, the clip, and I watched it, and she was like, well, like based on what was going on, this was an inevitable conclusion to what was happening in Gaza at the time. And my immediate thought is like, okay, let's just put that on the U.S., right? Like our Middle Eastern relationships prior to 2001 were also not super great. So by the same argument, you could be like, well, 9/11 was an inevitable outcome, right? Like it was like it happened because, our terrible policy in the Middle East and our terrible foreign relationships. And I'm like, no, this is fucking bad. Like, this is awful. And if you cannot look at something and call it what it is, like, go fuck yourself. And it's that simple. And like, in the same way that we can look at how Israel responded to this and have a very clear idea of like, man, yeah, this was, you will be far overshot. There's
Right.
genocide, and what's going on in Palestine is not great.
That's an amazing point. Sorry to interrupt but that's an amazing point. Do I get to say to the Free Palestine left that what happened in Gaza since October 7th was an inevitable outcome of October 7th? Do I get that? I'm quite certain I don't.
Nope.
Right? I'm quite certain that same inevitability argument only works one way in this particular case, and it only works
maybe you
one
should
way on
say
something
that.
like September 11th. Yeah, I should.
Maybe you should say that, because maybe this podcast will go viral if you do.
Yeah.
For all the wrong reasons.
Right. But I mean, your point is right on. You know, what is inevitable, right? How do we? And if we say, and I don't agree with this, but if someone were to say, you know what, I agree with her, it was fucking inevitable, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's this long history of conflict where both sides have been shitty. This was some sort of, explosion around this conflict was inevitable, right? I think that statement is probably pretty fair. That doesn't mean that you celebrate the death and destruction and inhumanity with which that inevitability comes to pass. And that's what October 8th was. Yeah, that's what October 8th was, a celebration of the inevitability of the explosion, right? And why would anybody ever celebrate that? I don't understand it. You have to be so lost in your understanding of people, of the shared condition that we all have called being human, right? You just have to be so cloistered, so untraveled, and it's not like I'm super traveled, but just so unable to recognize that no matter what side is being killed, it's people that are being killed, right? When the Israeli ministers, after, I think it was Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, it's always one of them, said on October 10th or 11th that these are he called the Hamas militants animals, and they should be treated like animals. And everybody freaked out, like, no, they're not animals. Blah, blah, blah. If you're celebrating on October 8th, don't tell me that you understand or respect the humanity of the Israeli people that were killed on October 7th. You don't. Don't. And if you're the co-chair of an ascendant party on the left, that's trying on the one hand to say, get money out of politics, good. Universal health care, good. Universal pre-K, good. All these policies, if that's what you're trying to say, you're going to lose it all. If you're digging in that October 8th was somehow like a noble protest, and you're going to lose me, right? Like, I'm now hyper vigilant about what the candidates that I'm trying to get out the vote for are saying about this, because I will absolutely stop right away. If Caitlin Rourke in Congressional District 10 here in Texas, if she came out and said something like that, within 10 minutes, my email would be sent to the people I'm working with. I'm out. Do this on your own. Period. Can't support it. Right? I don't have to be vigilant about that. I'll get to the other point later.
Yeah, well, no, the humanity, and we kind of broaden out, right, to some of these bigger points where it's like, man, like we need to be focused on caring for people. Like that, and that's what is attractive about the DSA platform, right? When you talk about all the good things some parts of it. Well, yes, correct. And which is what I wanted to get into, because when we originally talked about today's episode, we were going to do the isms, right? Capitalism, socialism, communism. And we decided to kind of boil it down to some of these stories that are in the news, because these are this is the time that we're in. And the truth is that the United States is a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of socialism. It's a little bit of capitalism, and probably even a little bit of communism now. So like you can look at situations and systems within our government and pretty clearly point out the underlying thread of which ism they belong to, and they're all represented in our government very clearly. So, but with that being the case, like the beauty of what some socialists look, it's so funny because when I first moved to Texas, I was very much kind of I think we talked about this, on the libertarian train, and it just kind of foundationally, and this was part of my own idealism, was that I believe that if you give opportunity for people to meet a need, and they can make money doing it, then the private sector should handle everything. That was kind of my overall viewpoint of things, is yeah, give people the opportunity to make money doing something, meeting a need, and it gets better. It gets done far better than government being able to do it. And I had a client that had, when I was personal training, that had family members that were very involved in government assistance with disabilities and some mental health stuff. And she explained her journey very clearly to me and was like, yeah, there are some instances where government actually is much better at solving this problem than the private sector. And I was like, yeah, you're not wrong. And as I've dug into this over the last few years more and more, yeah, there's a lot of fucking situations in our country where the government should be responsible for managing it and is far more capable of managing it and governing it, because it should be for the people. The private sector works in a number of areas when capitalism is involved, when there's restrictions on monopolies and people price gouging. Capitalism is actually really effective. But in situations like insurance, like capitalism, dude, we've just allowed all these companies to all get together, price gouge, merge with each other, create monopolies, and then charge us, fucking $40,000 a year for health insurance that we never want to use, because if we use it, we're going to pay out the ass anyway, still on top of what we're already paying. Like, this is a problem. Yeah, exactly. This is a problem. And this is a place where government actually should step in and could be incredibly effective, which the DSA platform is that. Like, their platforms these kind of ideas. A robust educational system. Like, we want our tax dollars. I would love to see our tax dollars spent, the amount of money we spend on defense. I would fucking die to see that kind of investment in our public schools and our healthcare infrastructure, and our childcare, like giving people support, giving young families support with affordable childcare, if not free childcare. These are the kind of things that government could actually make a real impact on. And we are just like, we throw around these terms like socialism as scary terms. And the funny part about it is that, like, we're in this moment in time where some of these policies and some of these people are starting to break through. And then we get these fucking stories where somebody says some batshit crazy thing like, what happened on October 7th was inevitable, or I don't believe in borders, or I don't believe in prisons, or abolish the police. And it's like, yeah, go fuck yourself. This is the fastest way to kill universal health care, is because you don't believe in prisons. Like, to be honest, all the people blocking universal health care are the ones that should probably be in those prisons. So it's just it's like half a step forward, 8 steps back, it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, I think I have to stop referring to the DSA when I'm talking about democratic socialism, because I think that there's more and more, there's just enough batshit cuckoo bananas stuff that the DSA believes in that's just like, this is not, defund the police is not democratic socialism, and open borders, and that's not democratic socialism. Socialism, we can look at Bernie Sanders and see what democratic socialism in the United States looks like. We can look at most European countries, right? Democratic socialism is this kind of idea that there's a balance, like you just described. There's some things that are best handled by government through a democratic system, through elections, through representation, through legislation, not through authoritarianism, right? That the democratic process can be used to mold and structure and manage certain things. Fire departments and police departments, of course, but healthcare in every other country is a huge one, right? Health insurance in general, but health insurance is the most startling one, I think, by definition, should not be a private industry. The whole idea of insurance is kind of socialist to begin with, right? Everybody pays a little bit of money, and the insurance companies know how much they're going to have to spend based on actuarial studies. We're going to need to spend $1 billion, so we have to raise $1 billion in premiums and a little bit of money to pay the people who actually work for us. But profit isn't part of that. The minute you put profit into that, now the motive is to make more money for your shareholders and not to pay out the premium, not to pay out the claims. So health insurance should absolutely be part of a democratic socialist country. The difference between democratic socialism and, scary Venezuela socialism, which is what we're going to hear all about in the next 84 days or so until the election. Venezuela style socialism is much more government takes over more and more industries, and they take the money. People still work and people still get paid, but your boss is much more the government. Rule is consolidated in one party, who uses that control to enrich themselves, to enrich a small working class. And because it's one party, services usually go down to shit. The whole system kind of falls apart because there is no democratic process in place to manage it. It's just at the whim of one person. So actual Venezuela style socialism doesn't work very well, and it hasn't worked very well in Cuba. It didn't work very well in the USSR before that fell apart. But there are important differences.
Yeah. And dude, you're 1,000% correct. And what's happening? So since I've been alive, it's always been the Republican. Like as soon as I started hearing it, as early as Obama, was just like the rhetoric from the right was like socialism, socialist, socialist, socialist. Like this is the most terrible thing. And at face value, when you know nothing about it, it does actually seem a little bit scary. So like, you're like, oh, what does that mean? Are we actually moving towards something that's more like nobody wants more government control, blah, blah, blah. And so, for years, I felt like that kind of worked a little bit, maybe even subconsciously on me. But we're in this moment in time where we're starting to see socialist ideas break through, right? We're getting the Mamdanis, the Abdul Sayeds, Bernie and AOC can't do a rally without it being, sold out in minutes. That like people are starting to adapt to socialism and starting to actually welcome, I think, some of the ideas. So like some people are looking at this and being like, man, like, all it takes now is a quick punch into Chat GPT or Google Gemini to be like, hey, is socialism bad? And then you start to realize like, oh, there's actually like really high performing countries in Europe that use this, that are safe, have closed borders, like don't just allow anybody to come through, have prisons still, but like they're not used by they're not used for political favor.
Sorry.
Yeah,
they are all democratic socialists, right? Those countries, those Western European countries and Scandinavian countries, all exist in the context of a democracy. I was reading before this, the city of Boston last year, or in 2024, instituted a 4% surtax on incomes over $1 million. Tax the rich, right? It's a lefty city, lefty state, tax the rich. And the money was to go to transportation and education. And of course you had all the regular, outrage. People are going to leave. Everybody's going to flee the state. This isn't going to work. The projections were that it would raise $2 billion a year. In the first year, it raised $2.4 billion. This year, in 2025, it raised $3.2 billion. That money is going to free buses in low-income areas, so people can get to work and not spend 10% of their income, which is low enough already, getting to work. It's going to free community colleges. It's going to free preschool. Right. And yes, people have left, in fact, Massachusetts, but the number of millionaires in Massachusetts has gone up, and that's a function of the stock market and business sales and the larger economy. But, you know, why is that bad? Tell me why, a 4% tax, which has outpaced expectations and provided free community college, which absolutely helps everybody. The
Yeah.
more educated you are, the better your city and state are going to be. Free buses so that people can get to work and put more food on their table. Tell me why these things are bad. Tell me why this policy on a 4% surtax on incomes over $1 million has not been successful.
Yeah.
Right? Because
They're
Boston's
not
doing
bad.
fine.
Yeah, they're not bad. I think, and we can unpack some of this stuff another time, but I think how the money is spent once it's received is also a critical part of it.
Sure.
Which, goes back to our earlier conversation. We have our fucking government signing NDAs with, tech companies. So, there's a lot of, trepidation, I think, about if we give more money to the government that they're going to just fucking blow it, which that is a real thing. And I totally understand it. But I wanted this conversation to kind of lead to the other ism that we were talking about, because in the advancement of we're seeing democratic socialists. The United States is for the most part a democracy. So we have socialist, uh, things in place like you just spoke about, but the scariness of that is wearing off. Like people are becoming aware that, hey, there are some socialist things that are beneficial to me. And so now we start to see the rhetoric go to communism, because now we have to escalate, right? Claiming that all liberals and progressives are socialists is actually not the claim that it was, 5-10 years ago. So now we have to start throwing communism out there. So, my question to you is who are the communists?
I mean, really, Donald Trump.
I mean, he's calling everybody else, and then we call them right back. And so I'm like, yeah, now everybody's being called a communist. So who is it, Elwin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note, true communism has never been achieved. Even the Soviet Union and Cuba, places like that, they were much more on the socialist part of the spectrum, where socialism is a step to communism. It's a lead-in to communism. So socialism, you start to see the government takeover of the means of production, government owning the means of production. What that means: companies, government owning companies, nationalizing industry, and then the payout in socialism is, kind of the phrase is from each according to their ability, and to each according to, in socialism, their abilities. You're still working. If you are able to do more advanced stuff, you're going to make more money. But the last part of that in communism is to each according to their needs, and you have a full communal system nationwide. There is no real income. Your income is determined by the government based on what you need, right? So we're nowhere near communism, right? But there's only one party that is nationalizing industries, that's taking ownership stake in private industries, and that is the Donald Trump Republican Party. They've done it in dozens of companies in the last 2 years. And that's really never been done before. When Obama wanted to give a loan to the automakers in the Cash for Clunkers program, that was a huge scandal. Right? Oh, you're taking over this industry. You're taking over the car industry. No, it wasn't. It was a loan, and it worked, and they paid it all back, and the government took its stake back. Right? The government temporarily did have a stake. But there's no plan to give the stake back in Donald Trump's, ownership plan. So, to the extent that communism exists, which it kind of doesn't, it's much more on the Republican side that the policies and the method of governing mirrors what socialism and communism are. Now, I don't think Donald Trump knows what communism is. I think that he's just kind of, I don't know, sundowning in some sense, where his brain is oatmeal. And when he was growing up, there was the Red Scare and communism. So those are the core memories that still exist in his brain. So he starts blurting it out when he feels like he wants to, without any true understanding of what it means. But yeah, I mean, without a doubt, the dangerous socialism The nationalizing of industry, I think, is much more on the Republican side. The this makes sense for society part of socialism. Are there certain things that people need that are better served by government in a democratic system? That is ascendant on the left.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, the Mamdani stuff in New York is kind of like a trial run for me. This is kind of a me, dabbling my toe in to see how things get done. But like for the most part, like, what all of us fucking want is we want a government that we can trust is doing what they say that they're doing with our money, and B is one that's responsive to needs. Like when shit needs to get done, it's doing it, and it's not it doesn't take forever. This is the foundational problem with how people are viewing government right now, and the things that need to change, and these are the things that democratic socialists are platforming, like speed of government, meeting the needs of the middle class, like trying to alleviate some of the pain points that we're going through. And yeah, like let's siphon out the bullshit and call let's call anti-Semitism what it is, which is exactly what what's her name was from the DSA. Like that absolutely is not part of the democratic socialism. That's one person's view, and I hope that gets taken for what it is and not broadcast on all of the good that can come from some of these ideas, and ideas that could actually change the life, like our kids' lives, and our grandchildren's lives, if some of this stuff comes into play over the next 10 to 15 years, which I really hope it does. So we'll see how it goes from there. So let's jump into our shut the fuck up today. Who are we telling, Owen? Who we mad at?
Most of the world today
Sweet.
Gets to shut the fuck up. All right. Just, most of the world.
I'm all in.
All in. And the reason why most of the world should shut the fuck up is because most of the world, I believe, simply does not know how much Jew hatred there is in the world today. Now, it's not as much in the United States as it is in some other countries. And I am not going to make the claim that the people who don't know are willfully ignorant or accepting it. I'm going to say that they just simply don't know that all this shit is going on. So shut the fuck up and start to do some researching. Google anti-Semitism in Europe. Google anti-Semitism on college campuses in Canada. Google Google Jew hatred in Montreal. Google Jew hatred in Greece, in Spain, in London, in Amsterdam, and you're going to find some disgusting shit. You're going to find a Google form in Italy that was put out, that was widely circulated, asking for people to identify the location of Israeli tourists and Jewish tourists, not just Israelis, Jewish tourists. You're going to find documents at a pride parade in Amsterdam with a QR code where you could report where in that parade Jewish people were. You're going to find that 95% of Jewish students on campus in Canada have directly experienced anti-Semitic and Jew hatred to their face while in college. Do it in the United States. You're going to find that a Jewish fraternity in San Diego was spray painted with Jew hate slogans. You're going to find that murals for the Palisades fire were defaced on the side of a synagogue. You're going to find that oil and bags of poo and pee and shit were thrown at synagogues in New York City. The list goes on and on and on, and it's multiple incidences around the world every week. And if you it is a symptom, like why it's going on, I could go on forever. But, if none of this shit has anything to do with protesting the war in Gaza. None of it. Okay. If you are attacking a young boy for wearing a yarmulke in Greece, you're not protesting a war in Israel. Okay. If you are wearing Free Palestine t-shirts at a Holocaust memorial in Austria, you're not protesting the war in Israel. If you're spray painting swastikas on a Holocaust memorial in, I think, Moldova, you're not protesting a war in Israel. If you're drawing Nazi symbols, if you're drawing swastikas on a tree in a park in Canada, you're not protesting Israel. If you're spray painting that fraternity house in California, if you're spray painting the temple in California, if you're throwing shit at synagogues in the United States, if you're harassing college students in Canada, if you're standing outside a hotel in Greece screaming Heil Hitler and for the Jews, you're not protesting a war in Gaza. You are hating Jews. Period. That's it. If you want to protest a war in Gaza, go to a fucking embassy. Go to an army base. Go to Gaza. Hold a fucking placard. Okay? Do that shit. But until you do, there's a very clear line between, some action against some individual thousands of miles away from the Middle East and protesting a government policy in the Middle East. And we're told that, all this protest against, what the Israeli government doing, it has nothing to do with Jews. It has to do with freeing Palestine and the oppression of the Gazans and, all this stuff. Bullshit. Bullshit needs to be called on this shit. And right now. It needs to be called on it right away because it is absolute bullshit. And we've let it slip and slip and slip and slip until it should slip no more. So if you didn't know this stuff was happening, shut the fuck up, close your mouth, open your ears, and open your eyes. Okay? And then make a decision. What would you do if nooses were being hung outside of a black church in the United States? Okay. What would you do if bags of shit were being thrown at a mosque in Canada? Okay. What would you do if a gay pride flag was being burned at a St. Patrick's Day parade in New York? What would your outrage be at those things? And ask yourself why it's different. Because I don't see it's any different. I see Jews being 0.2% of the world's population and the subject of an increasingly large share of its hate crimes. I see Jews being subject to 57% of the hate crimes in New York City, a city where they represent about 20% of the population and where they are by no means the largest minority. So, if you didn't know this, I'm not mad at you, okay? I'm respectfully asking you to shut the fuck up and open your eyes and open your ears. If you did know this and don't care, now I'm mad at you. Shut the fuck up about government policy, right? And at least be open about how you feel. And let's have a real conversation about that. Put yourself in the sunlight and let that be the disinfectant.
Good. Well, I have no response other than it fucking sucks. And
it
the
fucking
truth
sucks.
And man, hatred is not a solvable problem. I don't think it's going to get directed at minorities for the rest of time. It's fucking awful. But to be honest, it's also the most it's the most easy and maybe well-fed emotion, like it which is more often wrong. It's path of least resistance. So it's such a human thing because love and understanding takes work. Hate and ignorance takes none. And when you see it, it could not be more of a sign of lack of intelligence and laziness than anything else. So anytime I see hatred and bigotry towards any people group, it just reminds me that the person involved is a lazy and unintelligent human being, and they chose that. They chose that. That's an active decision to just be ignorant. So fuck all those people.
There's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of stupid people masquerading as smart.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And really it's just lazy. So it's because love is hard. It takes effort to look past and self-awareness to look past somebody else's follies or whatever they are, to recognize that we're all imperfect and we're all capable of the same bullshit. And so, but I don't know that we get to a place of peace on this side of life. Hopefully the next one we do.
We can try.
We can try. And the effort is worth it. I think it's maybe the trajectory that sends us into eternity. So, well, what are we talking about next week?
I don't know. I think let's see where the week takes us.
All right. I would, and hopefully, I would like to start this series on codifying norms. I think every week we should be tackling from top to bottom all of the shit that we need our elected officials talking about.
Do you want to start with the 25th Amendment? Something that is codified but never used? No, that's flipping it. No, I agree with you.
I've mapped this out. Elections, enforcement, corruption, power, transparency. And I think that they start in that order because elections are critical because our ability to reliably empower and remove our elected officials and leaders is the foundation of everything. And then everything under that, it just feeds into that funnel. So, but we'll jump into that next week, hopefully, unless some crazy shit happens, and then we'll go from there.
Cool.
Thanks for tuning in, y'all. See you later.
Thank you.